Okay? So, welcome to the course unit 7, PD 968. Okay. So, magte-take deep down lang tayo dun sa mismong law kung ano ba yung PD 968 or yung Adult Probation Law na meron tayo sa Philippines. So, just a little bit history of the probation in the Philippines. Bago po tayo nagkaroon ng PD 968, nag-start tayo kay Act number 4221. So, na-establish siya noong August 17, 1935 by the, sa Probation Office under the DOJ, led by the Chief Probation Officer appointed by the American Governor General. So, this law, Act 4221, was only good for only 2 years. Okay po. So, this law provided probation for first offenders 18 years of age and above convicted of certain crimes. After nun, bakit siya nawala within 2 years? Kasi nung nagkaroon tayo ng kaso ni People versus Vera, it challenged the constitutionality of Act 4221. So, kaya nawala siya sa linya itong ating probation in the Philippines na Act 4221 kasi nakita nila na unconstitutional itong si Act 4221. Ano yung mga challenge sa kanya? Encroaches the pardoning power of Chief Executive. So, nakukuha yun or nasasaklaw yung power ng executive natin. It constitutes an undue... Yes?
Ma'am, hindi po puno yung kanyo, yung PowerPoint nyo. Nakaputol po.
Pati ba sa iba?
Yes po, ma'am. Akala ko sa akin lang. Hindi
Ma'am,
po.
putol.
Sa amin po, ma'am, hindi
Okay naman,
po.
ma'am.
Okay.
Sa amin,
Baka
okay
nasa
po yun.
mga phone nyo lang yan. Okay? Kasi sa iba, hindi naman siya.
Naka-zoom yata eh.
Hindi siya.
Hindi.
Okay?
Try lang siguro ng landscape siguro.
Okay, again.
Landscape.
So, we have this one naman is, second is, it constitutes an undue delegation of legislative power, and the last one, it denies the equal protection of laws. So, yung tatlong dahilan niyan kung bakit naalis itong Act 4221, it remains unconstitutional. After that, ayan, so November 16, 1937, the Philippine Supreme Court, People versus Vera, declared it as unconstitutional. So, it ruled that said law contravened the equal protection of the law clause. So, at is surrender to provincial boards of each province the power to appropriate or not funds for the establishment of provincial probation courts. So, dahil doon sa kanilang People versus Vera, naalis po yung acting Act 4221 kasi nga, na-violate niya tong equal protection of the law clause. After nun, nagsampa ulit sila ng another bill para magkaroon tayo ng probation. So, that is House Bill number 393, filed by Teodoro Natividad and Ramon Bagatsing. Diba alam naman natin na si Teodoro Natividad was considered as the father of probation here in the Philippines. So, this is the second bill measure that attempts to establish an adult probation in the Philippines. So, it was passed in the lower house but pending in the Senate when martial law was proclaimed. So, nung nag-file kasi sila ng House Bill 393, okay, pa-urge na yung martial law nun. So, nagkaroon tayo ng probation in the Philippines. Ayan na. In 1975, di ba, 73, I think. So, noong 1975, the NAPOLCOM, okay, drafted a probation law. After 18 technical hearings over a period of 6 months, the draft decree was presented to a selected group of 369 jurists, penologists, civic leaders, and social and behavioral scientists and practitioners. So the group overwhelmingly endorsed the establishment of adult probation system in the country. So, on July 24, 1976, ayan na. Diyan na po nagkaroon tayo ng PD 968, also known as Adult Probation Law of 1976. It was signed into the law by the President of the Philippines. Since presidential decree yan, sino nag-sign yan?
Ferdinand Marcos.
Marcos. Okay. Bakit tayo nagkaroon ng probation law? Tatlo. To promote the correction and rehabilitation of offender with individualized treatment since nga sa labas siya. So, to provide an opportunity for the reformation of penitent offender. Again, pag sinabi natin penitent, nagsisisi lagi, di ba? Which might be less probable if he were to serve a prison sentence. And to prevent the commission of offenses. So, ayan. PD 968, Probation Law of 1976, it was signed by President Ferdinand Marcos last July 24, 1976, during the last day of the First National Conference on Crime Control held at Camp Aguinaldo. So, diyan po nagkaroon ng sign or pinirmahan ni the President Marcos itong law na to. So, nung January 3, 1978, dyan pa lang po nagkaroon ng effectivity of the application of substantive provisions concerning the grant of probation. Then, we have Chodolo C. Natividad, the former NAPOLCOM Commissioner and former Congressman of Bulacan, known as the Father of Probation in the Philippines. Since siya nga po yung nag-file ng House Bill 393. So, dahil na-file yung House Bill 393 at nag-come up sila ng PD 968. Always remember, kapag gumagawa sila ng batas, di ba magiging House Bill muna. Kapag House Bill pa yan, ibig sabihin pinag-aaralan pa ng mga senators or ng mga congressmen. Okay po? So, application of probation. Ayan. Sino ba ang pwedeng mag-apply sa probation? So, the application of probation shall be filed by sentenced or convicted offender whose sentence is not more than 6 years imprisonment. Again, kailan ka palang pwedeng mag-apply ng probation? Kung matatandaan nyo sa ating last discussion, kailangan you are sentenced muna, di ba? Na-sentence ka muna ng final conviction that you are guilty beyond reasonable doubt. At dapat ang offense mo or yung magiging sentence mo is not more than 6 years para makapag-apply ka sa probation. It shall be filed with the court that tried and sentenced the offender. Tanong, saan ka po mag-a-apply ng probation? Saan ka mag-a-apply na sa probation? Sa PPA ba? Parole and Probation of Administration? Saan ka mag-a-apply? Sa korte. Kung saan ka nilitis. For example, si Carlo Victoria. Carlo Victoria, are you here with us? Carlo Victoria?
3, 2, 1.
Ma'am,
Saan ka magpa-file ng probation?
Sa court, ma'am, kung saan ka po linitis, ma'am?
Sa court kung saan ka nilitis. Kailan ka pwedeng mag-apply?
Pag po yung kaso mo, ma'am, 6 years.
Not more
At
than
saka po, ma'am,
6 years.
wag.
At saka kapag
Ako, ma'am.
meron ng final
Tsaka po yung kaso mo, ma'am.
judgment. Okay po? Di ba
Ay,
naalala niyo
judgment,
yung
ma'am.
final judgment? Kailan nga? Ilang days bago nagiging final ang isang judgment ng isang court? How many days?
15
Days.
promulgation.
Okay. Pero,
Immigration.
tanong, kailangan ba tapusin muna yung 15 days or pwede nang i-final yon kahit hindi pa 15 days?
hindi ma'am, bago po matapos ma'am, yung 15 days, kailangan makapag-file.
Okay, very good. So, we have also yung application for probation. Probation is granted noon dati sa ating RA 6425, granted to drug addicts. So, under dati ng drug law, which is na-amend naman yan, ay pwedeng mag-apply ng probation yung mga drug addicts. Basta first-time offender. Until today, pinapractice po yan, lalo na nung nagkaroon tayo ng tokhang. So, PD 603, okay, yung sa mga child naman, again, naalala yung PD 603 or yung sa ating RA 9344 na kapag yung bata ang gumawa ng crime, di ba? Therefore, meron siyang automatic probation. Kaya nga, di ba, kapag child and youth ang gumawa ng crime, automatically meron siyang suspension of sentence and mag-undergo siya ng probation, and that is PD 603 and RA 9344. So, sa matter or sa case ng mga bata, okay, we have automatic probation or probation is a matter of right. Pero sa mga adults, yan, probation is just a matter of ano siya?
Privilege.
Privilege. Ito, petition for probation. Ito, is there a need to apply for probation to avail of its benefits? Mag-a-apply ka ba? O for example, John Robert Lumagi, nandito ka ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, John Robert Lumagi, nakulong ka, tapos 5 years lang ang offense mo. Automatic ka bang may probation?
Hindi po, ma'am.
Okay, always remember, sabi ko nga, probation, it is just a matter of privilege. Therefore, kahit ang kaso mo, it is just, alam mo na, automatic na 6 years below lang ang penalty mo, there is a need for you to apply. hindi po mabibigyan ng automatic probation. Saan lang yung may automatic probation? Sa mga child
Juvenile.
and youth offender. So, sabi niya, is there a need to apply for probation to avail of its benefits? Yes. Sabi niya, it will not be granted except upon the application by the accused. The necessity for such application is indicated in Section 4 of PD 968, which states that the trial court may, after each shall have convicted and sentenced a defendant, and upon application by said defendant within the period of perfecting an appeal. So, within that 15 days, kailangan mong mag-apply for probation. Naiintindihan po? Naiintindihan?
Yes, ma'am.
Next. So, ang tanong, when can a petitioner file his application for probation? Kailan ka pwedeng mag-apply? The law says that the application should be made within the period perfecting an appeal or within 15 days from the promulgation of notice of judgment. So, for example, nagkaroon ng hatulan ngayon, so pag sinabi ni judge na you are guilty beyond reasonable doubt, then you have 15 days. Diba? Bago ma-final yung judgment na yan, for you to apply for probation. So, tanong, is there a form? Meron po bang form pag nag-apply ng probation? Is there a form prescribed for the application of probation? The answer is yes. Meron pong form dyan. It shall be in the form approved by the Secretary of Justice as recommended by the legislator or as may be prescribed by the Supreme Court. Next. Tanong, where can we file the application for probation again? Saan ka ulit mag-apply? Sa trial court kung saan ka? Sa judge, pwede? Sa trial court kung saan ka? Nilitis. Dun sa kaso mo. Okay po? Hindi siya ina-apply dun sa Parole and Probation Administration, ha? Lininawin ko lang. Again, kapag probation, sa court ka po nag-a-apply. Okay? Tanong, what will be the duty of the court after the receipt of application? For example, ano naman ang duty? For example, nag-apply na si James Andrew Matito for the probation. Anong gagawin ng court? The trial court, ito ha, may notify the concerned prosecuting officer of the application at a reasonable time before the scheduled hearing thereof. So, ang mangyari nun, itong si judge, okay, magkakaroon siya ng magpapapasa siya ng investigation report kasi niyan. Okay, so dun sa prosecuting officer. So, bibigyan niya ng reasonable time para magkaroon ng hearing about dyan sa probation. So, what are the procedures in applying for probation? Oh, ito dapat nyo talagang malaman. Baka sakali, makulong kayo, tapos gusto nyo mag-apply ng probation. Okay, the offender or his counsel files a petition with a convicting court or kung saan ka nagkaroon ng paglilitis. The court determines convict qualifications and notify the prosecutor of the filing of petition. So, sasabihin niya yung prosecutor na yung taong, yung offender nag-apply na ng probation. So, the prosecutor submits his comments on such application within 10 days from the receipt of notification. So, mangyari kasi nun, kanwari, ganito, bigyan ko ng example. For example, si Chucky Almerido, siya yung offender natin. Okay. So, nagkaroon na ng Chucky, are you with us?
Yes, ma'am.
For example, ikaw yung nakulong. Ikaw yung naparusahan. So, sabihin na natin si Christian Kate Pagarigan, siya yung sa court or yung sa judge. So, nag-promulgation na ng judgment itong si Pagarigan. So, after that, meron kang ilang araw? 15 days, di ba?
Yes,
you have
ma'am.
15 days para mag-apply. So, ang gagawin mo niyan, mag-a-apply ka saan?
Sa court, ma'am.
Sa court. Okay. Ibig sabihin, ipapasa mo kay Christian Pagarigan. After nun, kapag na-receive ni Christian Pagarigan yung mismong petition mo, anong gagawin ni Christian Pagarigan? Anong gagawin mo, Pagarigan?
Isa sa
Magko-conduct muna ng process, ma'am, kung saan i-investigahan muna na maayos yung nangyari, yung ginawang krimen.
Sino notify mo?
O, ano kasi?
Yung prosecutor on the case. Kung sino yung nagsampa ng kaso kay Chucky nun, dati. Naalala? Again, ang gagawin ni court nun or ni judge, ino-notify niya ang prosecutor kung sino nagsampa man nung kaso ni kay Chucky nun. Naintindihan? Okay, after nun, 'di ba? Anong gagawin ni prosecutor? Sabihin natin si prosecutor si Erica Ann Mercado. Mercado, are you with us? Mercado?
Yes, ma'am.
O, kanyari ikaw yung prosecutor, ikaw yung nagpapakulong kay Chucky. So dahil nagkaroon ng promulgation of judgment, nag-apply na ng petition kay Pagarigan, which is siya yung judge. Ang gagawin ni judge sa'yo, after niyang ma-receive yung probation na application or petition, ibibigay niya sa'yo, ino-notify ka niya. Anong gagawin mo as a prosecutor? Ito ang gagawin mo as a prosecutor. The prosecutor submits his comments on the such application within 10 days from receipt of the notification. So, after kang ni-notify ni Mr. Pagarigan, ikaw, Mercado, okay, as a prosecutor, kailangan mong mag-reply or mag-comment doon sa application ni Mr. Almerido. Naiintindihan niyo ba yan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ito. If petitioner is qualified, okay, pag nakita natin, kapag nag-apply ka pa lang ng probation, ang tawag sa'yo ay petitioner. Okay? If petitioner is qualified, his application is referred to the probation officer for post-sentence investigation. Kapag nakita ni prosecution, yan, ni Mercado, tsaka ni judge, na qualified naman siya para mag-apply ng probation, ang gagawin nila, okay, si judge or si court, hahanap ng probation officer. Si Pagarigan. Okay? So, the post-sentence investigation report or tinatawag nating PSIR is submitted by the probation officer to the court within 60 days. So, the court grants or denies the petition for probation within 15 days upon receipt of the PSIR. O, for example, sino bang gusto maging probation officer dito? For example, si Ashley. Ashley, are you with us? Ashley.
Ma'am.
For example, ikaw yung probation officer. So, ang mangyari nun, di ba? Again, ulitin lang natin yung senaryo. Okay? Nakulong si Chucky, nasentensyan siya ng 5 years na penalty. So, tinanggap niya, nag-apply siya ng probation kanino? Doon sa korte. Tapos, ang judge daw si Pagarigan. Anong gagawin nga ni Pagarigan nung once na-receive niya yung application ni Almerido? Anong gagawin mo, Pagarigan?
Investigahan po at pag-aaralan yung krimen na nangyari. Tapos ipapasa kay, yung nagsampang kaso, yung prosecutor po, na si Erica.
And then, Erica, anong gagawin mo nun kapag na-receive mo yung notification? Erica? Anong gagawin mo nun? Bungke? Kapag na-receive mo na yung notification ni judge? Erica Ann Mercado, anong gagawin mo nun? As a prosecutor? Anyone? Anong gagawin ni Erica nun as a prosecutor?
Magko-comment po, ma'am.
Magko-comment siya within
10 days
10
po.
days. Okay. After nun, di ba? Kapag qualified siya, anong gagawin ni Christian Kate Pagarigan? Pag
Po, ma'am.
Maghahanap lang ng probation officer, ma'am.
naghahanap siya ng probation officer. Si
Officer.
probation officer, ikaw, Ashley, anong gagawin mo kapag inanyayahan ka ni judge? Ashley, are you with us? Anong gagawin mo? Kailangan mong magpasa ng tinatawag nating PSIR or yung Post-Sentence Investigation Report. So, kailangan gagawa yon ng yung probation officer ng Post-Sentence Investigation Report about doon kay Chucky Almerido. If qualified ba siyang i-grant ng probation or hindi. Intindihan? So, the court grants or denies the petition for probation within 15 days upon the receipt of PSIR. So, gagawa muna ng PSIR itong si probation officer within 60 days. Kapag napasa na niya yung PSIR na yon, doon pa lang magja-judge ulit itong si Christian Kate Pagarigan whether based on that report na submitted ni probation officer if qualified ba talaga si Chucky or hindi. Intindihan? So, what is PSIR or yung tinatawag nating post-sentence investigation? Tignan nyo ha. no person shall be placed on the probation except upon prior investigation of the probation officer. Tandaan nyo yan, ha? And the determination of by the court that the ends of justice and the best interest of the public as well as of the defendant will be served thereby. Okay? Lagi nyong tandaan, kahit pa in-evaluate na ni judge yan, kailangan pa rin pong mag-conduct ng post-sentence investigation report itong si probation officer. Ilang days meron siya para mag-conduct ng post-sentence investigation report? 60?
60 days.
Tignan nyo, no. PSI is mandatory. Mandatory yan. It is a prerequisite in granting probation. What is the purpose of post-sentence investigation report? To be able the trial court to determine whether or not the applicant would be served by the grant or denial of the application. So, paano ba? Ikaw, Miss Ashley, ano ba ang gagawin mo as a probation officer? Ito gagawin nyo. Number 1, you have the preliminary procedure. Anong ginagawa mo dito? The probation officer, upon receipt of the order from the court, he shall assign the same probation officer to conduct post-sentence investigation. And then, magkakandak ka ng initial interview. Within 5 working days from the receipt from the court order, for example, binigyan ka ng court order ni Pagarigan, the probation officer shall interview the petitioner to accomplish under oath a worksheet, or yung tinatawag nilang PA form number 1. The information contained in the worksheet shall serve as the basis for further investigation. So, magkakaroon ka muna ng initial interview dun sa kliyente mo. So, ang ini-interview mo dito si Chucky Al Merido. So, the petitioner shall sign a waiver, or yung tinatawag nating PA form number 2, authorizing the probation administration to secure any and all pertinent documents and information. After niyang mag-sign ng waiver, ang gagawin mo is investigation na. Ayan. Upon completion of the worksheet, the probation officer shall conduct thorough investigation. Pag sinabi nating thorough, maigi. Okay? Thorough investigation on the antecedents, mental, physical condition, character, and socio-economic status of petitioner. Ang PSIR, aalamin niya lahat, complete background investigation yan. Sa pag-iisip mo, personality mo, sinong kasama mo, saan ka nakatira, sinong nakakasalamuha mo. So, the probation officer shall determine and recommend manner by which the petitioner will be supervised if granted probation. Next, kailangan mo din ang tinatawag na collateral information. So, in the gathering of the collateral information, person who have knowledge of the petitioner of the victim or relative shall be interviewed. So, hindi lang yung mismong petitioner ang ini-interview mo dito. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, it is a complete background investigation wherein kailangan mong i-interview kung sino man yung nakakasama niya, saan siya nakatira, sinong pamilya niya, sino man yung mga different relatives niya or friends. And then magkakaroon ka din ng subsequent interviews. The probation officer shall conduct subsequent interviews of the petitioner or other person to secure additional data or clarity discrepancies between the information received from the petitioner and those secured by the other sources. After that, nagkaroon ka ng another nature of interviews. Sabi nga niya, the information gathered from the interviews of petitioners and collateral information sources shall be confidential in nature. So, hindi ibig sabihin na itong si Ashley, kanwari, kinakandak niya nga na-investigate itong si Chucky, pagsasabi na niya kung kani-kanino, ano man ang nalaman niya. Okay, always confidential in nature kung ano man ang nalaman niya sa interview. So, and then, we have the post-sentence information. So, the probation officer shall inform the petitioner of the confidentiality of the information taken. So, responsibility din ni Ashley no, na sabihin kay Chucky na lahat naman ng malalaman ko about your life, diba? Your personal life, complete background investigation, it will be confidential to them. So, ayan na. After nun, we have na yung post-sentence investigation report. So, upon the completion of post-sentence investigation, the head of probation shall submit a PSIR to the court within period prescribed in Section 7 of these rules. Diba? So, yun na yung magsasubmit na ng 60 days. Yung within 60 days, kailangan nakapag-submit siya ng post-sentence investigation report. Kanino yung isasubmit yun?
Sa court?
Sa court. Yan. So, kailangan within 60 days natapos siya ng isang probation officer. So, ano yung content ng report na yan? The report shall contain ito. Tignan nyo, ang dami niya. The circumstances surrounding the offense which petitioner was convicted, drawn court records, lahat ng records niya sa labas ng kulungan, sa loob ng kulungan, or naman lahat ng na-experience niya. Psychosocial information, pwede rin yan. Evaluation of petitioner's suitability for probation, potential and social integration in the community, sinong nakakasama niya. Recommendation, ayan. Recommendation, either the grant of the petition for probation shall include the program of supervision, suggested term, or deny the petition for probation. Sa PSIR, okay, sa post-sentence investigation report, naka-include doon whether itong mga probation officer is ginagrant ba nila or nakikita nila or dinedenay nila yung application ni Chucky or nung ating petitioner. Okay? And then, pati yung financial status niyan, capability and civil obligation, lahat yan nakalagay. So, who signs the report? Sino ang magsasign ng report na yan? The report shall signed by the investigating probation officer. Kung si Ashley ang naggawa or nag-conduct ng investigation na yan, therefore, siya po ang magsasign ng PSIR. And then, to be approved nung head nila, yung probation office, who shall initial all the pages of the report. So, form of investigation report. The investigation report to be submitted by the probation officer under Section 5 hereof shall be in the form prescribed by the probation administrator and approved by the Secretary of Justice. So, lahat ng investigation report na ipapasa naman ni ating probation officer, tinatawag nating PSIR, kailangan kung ano yung sinusundan na investigation report na approved ng probation administrator at saka ng ating Secretary of Justice. Okay po ba tayo doon? So, ilan ang period? Again, the probation officer shall submit to the court the investigation report on the defendant not later than 60 days. Ibig sabihin, meron siyang 60 days para makapagpasa or tapusin itong PSIR na yan. So, the court shall resolve the petition for the probation not later than 5 days. For example, pinasa na ni Ashley sa'yo, Mr. Pagarigan. Ilang days meron ka para pag-aralan yon?
5 days, ma'am.
5 days. So, meron na lang 5 days nun yung korte para pag-aralan yung sinubmit na PSIR nitong si probation officer. So, wag na to. Tanong, mayroon pa ba kayong tanong dun sa process ng application? Do you have?
Ma'am, ako po.
Yes, ano yan?
What if po kung yun sa other party po, katulad po ng prosecutor, di ba, unang magbibigay regarding sa comments?
Yes.
Paano po kung na-denied po ng prosecutor yung pag-approve sa,
Okay.
di na po siya?
Therefore, itong si court or ikaw as a judge, okay? Kahit hindi na siya mag-notify no dun sa probation officer.
Automatic po, denied
Yes.
na po.
Kahit kung kanwara nakita ni probation nitong si prosecutor at ikaw as a judge na hindi siya applicable or hindi siya pasok dun sa qualification. Therefore, kapag nakita nyo na sa inyo pa lang, hindi na siya pwede. Hindi mo na siya pwedeng ibigay pa dun sa probation officer. Dun pa lang sa inyo, dun sa application pa lang sa inyo, to automatically denied mo na.
Sige po, ma'am. Yan lang po.
Tanong po kayo, iba? Okay, ito. Effects of filing an application for probation. Ano ba yung magiging epekto? So, the court may, upon receipt of the application, suspend the execution of sentence imposed in the judgment. So, the pending submission of the PSIR and the resolution of the application, the applicant may be allowed on temporary liberty under his bail, on a new bail, or release on recognizance. Diba kasi, ano pong gagawin niya, ma'am, dun sa 60 days? Nakakulong ba siya or what? Diba? Anong gagawin niya? Ito, ang mangyayari dyan, okay, habang hinihintay yung resulta, okay po, habang hinihintay yung resulta ng probation, okay po, pwede siyang naka-detain muna, okay, ibig sabihin, hindi pa naman nakalagay sa mismong kulungan, naka-detain lang, or pwede siyang i-allow ng, ito, bail or release on new bail or release on recognizance, or yung bail on recognizance. Yung sinasabi ko merong isang tao na pagkakatiwalaan natin. Hanggang sa matapos yung process ng PSIR. So, ibig sabihin, yung masususpend muna yung execution ng sentence niya. Kasi nga, di ba, hindi pa naman sure. For example, ganito kasi scenario niyan. For For example, si Chucky, di ba, nag-apply siya. Okay. Sabihin mo na sinabi ni Erica Ann Mercado, sige, okay lang pong mag-apply. Tapos, pina-investigate natin kay Ashley as a probation officer. Di ba si Ashley, meron siyang 60 days para tapusin yung So, hindi naman ibig sabihin tatapusin yung 60 days. So, nasa kanya yon kung gaano niya kabilis or kabagal na tapusin yung PSIR. Ang tanong, ano pong mangyayari kay Chucky, ma'am, within habang nag-investigate pa si Ashley? Okay, si Chucky, masususpend muna yung kanyang kulong. 'Di ba? Dapat makulong siya. 'Di ba? Dapat makukulong na siya niyan. So, therefore, masususpend muna siya. And, so, meron siyang, ma-allow siya on temporary liberty on his bail. Or parang magkakaroon ng release on recognizance. So, habang hinihintay yung PSIR ni Ashley as a probation officer, itong si Chucky is naka-release on recognizance. Kasi hindi pa naman sure, di ba? Hindi pa naman sure if talagang ma-apply siya ng probation or hindi. Naintindihan po? Kasi di ba, pwedeng sa investigation ni Ashley, pwedeng makita niya na hindi pala siya qualified. So therefore, ang mangyayari kay Chucky noon, pag nandun na yung mismong PSIR ni Ashley, pabalik siya ng kulungan at pagsaserve siya ng sentence niya. Naintindihan po ba? So, habang hinihintay yung investigation ni Ashley as probation officer, ang gagawin niya muna is, he is released on recognizance or in his bail. Naintindihan po? Naintindihan? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
So, eto. Sino ba yung mga disqualified? Diba? Disqualification for probation. Those who were sentenced to more than 6 years. Kapag more than 6 years na ang penalty mo, hindi ka na pwedeng mag-apply ng probation. Those who were convicted in the crimes against security. Those previously convicted and punished not less than 1 month and 1 day imprisonment or fine of 200 pesos. Kapag nakulong ka na, kasi again, always remember, ang probation is for the first time offenders lang. For example, nasampahan ka na ng kaso noon, hindi ka na pwedeng mag-apply. So, those who were previously granted probation, lalo na, for example, nag-grant ka na ng probation noon, lalong hindi ka na pwedeng mag-apply. Once in a lifetime lang po yan. Those who were already serving their sentence when probation became applicable. So, yung mga nakapag-serve na ng pagkakulong, therefore, hindi na rin sila pwedeng mag-apply ng probation. So, grant of probation. Ayun na. Subject to the provision of this decree, the court may, after it shall have convicted a sentenced defendant and upon application at any time of the said defendant, suspend the execution of sentence and place the defendant on probation for such period and such upon terms and condition as it may deem best. So, probation may be granted, diba? Whether the sentence impose a term of imprisonment or a fine only. An application for probation shall be filed with the trial court with the notice to appellate court if an appeal has been taken from the sentence of conviction. So, the filing of application shall be deemed a waiver to right to appeal, automatic withdrawal of the pending appeal. Diba nga, sabi ko sa inyo, kapag nag-apply ka na sa probation, automatically, you waive your right to appeal. Na-discuss ko na yan last meeting. Ito. The court will not grant probation if it finds. Okay, ito yung tinatanong mo kanina, pagarigan. Okay? The offender can be treated better in mental institution or other places of correction. Okay? The offender is a risk to the community. The offense is grievous to the eyes of the community. Kahit na yung penalty niya, sabihin natin 5 years lang. Pero kung kanwari, nakikita natin na yung offender is a risk, sabi niya, tapos yung offense na nagawa niya is grievous to the eyes, or nakikita mo na mas better na lagay siya sa mental institution or other places for correction. Therefore, automatically, the court will not grant probation to the petitioner. So, when probation is granted, ayan, paano naman? Sabihin natin si Ashley, ayan na, binigay na yung PSIR kay Pagarigan. Si Pagarigan, meron siyang ilang days? How many days do you have, Pagarigan?
5 po, ma'am.
5 days, or yung korte natin, merong 5 days to act on that resolution. So, what will happen? Kapag nag-grant, sige, imagine na natin na si Chucky is nag-grant ng, ang nag-grant sa kanya? probation. So, anong gagawin mo? Ito, Chucky, ang gagawin mo, ha? So, the probationer must present himself to his probation officer within 72 hours. So, once na nag-grant yung probation mo, kailangan mong magpakita doon sa probation officer within 72 hours. So, report to his probation officers at least once a month. Okay, ito yung mga conditions mo. Once a month, lagi kang nagpapakita sa probation officer na nagsusupervise sa'yo. You are obliged to not to commit another crime. Siyempre, automatic kapag nag-commit ka ng another crime, automatic, babawiin ang probation mo, makukulong ka. Comply with any other lawful conditions imposed by the court. Naku ha? So, yun lang yung mga basic, pero mamaya discuss ko pa yung mga iba. So, if the probationer committed the crime while under probation, what would be the consequences? O, for example, si Chucky nag-undergo na ng probation. Pero habang nag-undergo siya ng probation, nag-commit siya ng another crime. What will happen? Ito mangyayari sa'yo, Chucky. Okay?
Pwede po akong
Okay, the probationer will be arrested for the violation of the condition of probation, the prosecution of the new crime committed, and the court will order the serving of the original sentence of the previous offense. So, ano mangyayari? For example, si Chucky nag-undergo ng probation. Kaso, nag-commit siya ng another crime, nag-commit siya ng murder. Anong mangyayari sa kanya? Automatically, si Mr. Chucky, isa-serve niya yung original sentence niya. Kung ang original sentence niya dun sa probation na in-applyan niya is 5 years, therefore, okay, makukulong ka na dun sa 5 years. Back to 0. Okay, no matter what na kung ilang years ka nang nagsaserve ng probation mo, okay, back to 0 ka dyan. Original sentence ka. Intindihan? And then, magkakaroon ka pa ng prosecution para dun sa bago mong crime na ginawa. Therefore, magkakaroon ka rin again ng another trial for the new crime na ginawa mo. Nakakasunod po ba kayo? Nakakasunod pa? Okay.
Yes po.
Next. Ito, another conditions of probation. So, ito, dagdagan lang natin to, di ba? Ayan, dagdagan lang natin. Another conditions for probations. Again, di ba, kailangan niya magpakita within 72 hours, at least once a month, di ba? The court may also require the probationer to, ayan, cooperate with program of supervision, meet his family responsibilities, devote himself to specific employment, not to said, hindi ka pwede agad-agad makapag-change ng trabaho dito. Kung ano yung trabaho mo noon, okay, magpapaalam ka muna sa probation officer bago ka mag-change ng trabaho mo. Ito pa, you will undergo medical, psychological, or psychiatric examination. Pursue a prescribed secular study. Alam niyo secular study? Yung Bible study, ganyan. Or so, pwede rin yung vocational training. Yan, i-enroll nila kayo dyan. Attend or reside in the facility established for instruction, recreation, or residence of person on probation. Ito yung mga hello family, sabi niya. Makikita niyan kapag nag-OJT kayo sa mga probation office, pumupunta sila dyan every week. Meron silang hello family. And then, refrain from visiting houses of ill repute. Bawal kayo. Pag sinabing houses of ill repute, ito yung mga beer house. Ayan, bawal kayo dyan. Abstain from drinking intoxicating beverages to excess. Ito pa. Permit the probation officer or an authorized social worker to visit his home and place of work. So, ibig sabihin, kung saan ka man nakatira, saan ka man nagtatrabaho, yung probation officer mo, pwede ka niyang bisitahin kahit kailan. And then, reside at the premise, approve it, and not to change his residence without its prior written approval. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, hindi kayo pwedeng agad-agad makapag-change ng work. Also, kung saan kayo nakatira, doon lang kayo. Hindi kayo pwedeng maglipat ng bahay. Okay? Satisfy any other condition related to the rehabilitation of defendant and not unduly restrictive of his liberty or incompatible with his freedom of conscience. Okay? So, wag na rin to. Tanong, how long is the period of probation? Gano'ng katagal? Not more than 2 years if the sentence is imprisonment for 1 year or less. Okay po. For example, meron kang kaso, tapos ang penalty mo is 1 year. Okay, nag-apply ka ng probation, tapos tawag dito, nag-grant. So, therefore, mag-undergo ka ng probation for not more than 2 years. Basta kung ang penalty mo is 1 year or less, mag-undergo ka ng probation of not more than 2 years. Pero, okay, kapag ang kaso mo naman is more than 1 year, okay, but not more than 6 years, therefore, magsaserve ka ng sentence mo ng probation within not more than 6 years. Okay, probation starts upon issuance of the court granting probation. Naintindihan po ba? For example, si Chucky, yung talagang kaso niya, drug, sabihin natin 1 year talaga yung pagkakulong niya. Therefore, kung nag-grant man ng probation sa kanya, mag-undergo siya ng probation within not more than 2 years. Pero kung kanwari si Chucky, nung nag-apply siya ng probation niya, is ang talagang penalty niya is 3 years. Therefore, mag-undergo siya ng probation niya of not more than 6 years. Naintindihan po? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Naintindihan nyo? Ang tanong, what if si Chucky gumawa ng crime? Anong mangyari sa kanya? Anong magiging penalty niya?
Madi-disqualify yung probation
Tapos
po, ma'am.
marireset yung pagkakakulong niya ulit, mababaliwala ulit.
Anong mangyari sa'yo? Ano na yung magiging parusa mo nun?
2 taon po ako nakulong na. Yung 2 taon po na yun, ma'am, babalik po ulit sa norma, sa dati.
So, kung kunwari, ang original na imprisonment mo is 5 years, 5 years ulit. Tama po ba?
Po, ma'am.
Yes. Sige. Very good. So, nakaiintindihan nyo naman pala. Ito, when should probation be denied? Kailan na-deny ang probation? So, the offender is in need of correctional treatment can be provided effectively by his commitment to one institution. Yung kanina lang to, yung ito. Ito yan. Yan. Bakit siya na will not grant probation? Okay? So, wag na nating ulitin. Ito. The offender may be released pending application for probation. Ito. On the same bond he filed during trial or on a new bond to the custody of responsible member. Again, yung kanina lang din to, yung for example, kapag nag-apply ka, di ba, anong mangyayari sa'yo habang yung sa 60 days? So, marirelease ka, di ba, on recognizance or on bail, habang hinihintay matapos yung PSIR mo. So, parang there is an automatic suspension muna ng inyong sentence. Ito. When can court modify and conditions of probation? So, for example, meron ka ng new set of conditions. Tanong, pwede ba niyang i-modify ng court yan? For example, gusto niyang maging mas mahigpit yung condition niya kay Chucky. Anong gagawin niya? Kailan? At any time during supervision. Okay? After summary hearing when the probationer violated any of his condition, upon application by the probation officer or the probationer himself. Okay? Pwede pong ma-modify yan. Kasi alam nyo, for example, yan si Chucky, na-apply siya ng probation, nag-grant siya ng probation. Sasabihin lahat ng conditions niya. Other than those nung sa mention ko kanina, yung mga conditions kung paano ka mabubuhay when you are having a probation. So, pwede pang i-modify yan. So, for example, itong si Chucky nakapag-violate ng minimal lang naman. Okay? So, ang gagawin ni court, hindi naman automatically na aalisin na sa pagka-probation si Chucky. For example, nahuli si Chucky na nakainom ng isang basong alak. Okay? So, hindi naman automatically aalisin na sa pagka-probation si Chucky. Magkakaroon muna tayong tinatawag na summary hearing. So, parang pag-aaralan muna yung violation niya. Okay? Basta ang ginawa niyang violation is tungkol dun sa condition niya as a probation officer. Basta hindi pa siya crime, therefore magkakaroon muna ng summary hearing. So, parang titingnan muna if devious act ba talaga yung ginawa ni probationer natin. Okay? So, therefore, pwede nang i-modify ni court yun. Pwedeng i-apply mismo ni probation officer or ni probationer himself. Note, sabi niya, only the judge who heard and decided the case has the power to grant, deny, modify, revoke, and terminate probation. So, therefore, si Pagarigan lang, kung sa case natin, siya lang ang pwedeng mag-deny, mag-grant, mag-modify, mag-revoke nung probation. Intindihan nyo, kung kanino yung judge na yon, siya lang po. Hindi po pwedeng paiba-iba. Okay? Important terms. Ito. Probation, alam nyo ng meaning to? Kapag nag-a-apply ka, okay, or yung taong nag-a-undergo ng probation, ang tawag sa kanya ay probationer. If nag-a-apply pa lang siya, anong tawag sa kanya?
Petitioner.
Petitioner.
Okay. Sino naman yung probation officer? Sino yan? Yung nagsusupervise kay probationer. Or si Ashley, sabi nga natin. Means one who investigates for the court referrer for the probation or supervises a probationer or both. Eto, sino naman yung absconding probationer? Sino yan? Diba? A person whose probation was granted but failed to report for supervision within the period ordered by the court, or a probationer who fails to continue reporting for supervision and whose whereabouts are unknown for reasonable period of time. For example, si Chucky, di ba? Nung nag-apply si Chucky, ang tawag sa kanya petitioner. Nung nag-grant na ang probation sa kanya, ang tawag sa kanya ay? Ang tawag sa kanya?
Probationer.
Probationer. Kailan magiging absconding probationer? Kapag itong
Pag
si
di pag
Chucky,
nakapag-report.
hindi na nakikipagkita dun sa kanyang probation officer. Or parang tinatakasan na niya yung pagiging probationer niya. Ang tawag sa kanya ay absconding probationer. Control and supervision of probationer. So, the probationer and his probation program shall be under the control of the court, diba? Who place him on the probation subject to actual supervision and visitation by the probation officer. As you can see, or kung nakikinig kayo kanina, sabi ko nga, yung court lang po ang pwedeng mag-modify, diba? Mag-grant, mag-deny ng kaniyang probation conditions. So, ibig sabihin, nasa kanyang control and supervision ng probationer. So, whenever a probationer is permitted to reside in a place, okay, under the jurisdiction of another court, control over him shall be transferred to the executive judge of the court of first instance of that place. And in such case, a copy of probation order, the investigation report, and other pertinent records shall be furnished under executive judge. So thereafter, the executive judge to whom jurisdiction over the probationer is transferred shall have the power with respect to him that was previously possessed by the court which granted the probation. Okay. Ito kasing nangyari. Pwede kang lumipat ng bahay. Okay? Di ba, general rule, bawal kang lumipat ng bahay. Dapat meron ka munang pagpapaalam kay probation officer. Pati nga, di ba, sa trabaho, kailangan magpapaalam ka muna. So, ganoon. Kapag lilipat ka, for example, sa Pampanga ka nagkakandak ng probation, if lilipat ka ng Angeles, okay, ililipat din lahat ng files mo kasi doon sa judge kung saan, kung sino man yung first executive judge doon sa mismong place na yon. So, arrest of probationer. Ito. At any time during probation, the court may issue warrant of arrest of a probationer for violation of any condition of probation. Again, the probationer once arrested and detained shall immediately be brought before the court for the hearing. Again, di ba, sabi ko nga po, hindi naman automatically matatanggal po sa pagka-probation itong sa probationer. So, ang mangyayari kasi magkakaroon muna ng summary hearing. So, the defendant may be admitted to bail pending such hearing, or in such case, the provision regarding release on bail of person charged with a crime shall be applicable to the probationers arrested under his provision. Kasi automatically, kapag po nag-violate ka ng probation conditions mo, so huhulihin ka nila para mag-conduct ng investigation. So, sa pagkuhuli sa'yo, pwede ka naman ding still mag-bail habang nag-hearing. So, if the violation, okay, if the violation is established, the court may revoke or continue his probation and modify the conditions thereof. Again, kapag, for example, si Chucky nag-violate ng probation conditions niya, nakainom siya ng isang basong alak. So, what will happen? So, magkakaroon ng summary hearing. So, si court nun, okay, pwede niyang i-revoke, diba? And then, the court shall order the probationer to serve the sentence originally imposed. Tanong, Chucky, ano yung magiging parusa mo nun kapag ni-revoke ni court?
Yung dati kong kaso, ma'am, tama po?
Yes, diba? An order revoking the grant of probation or modifying the terms and conditions thereof shall not be appealable. Therefore, pwede ka pang mag-appeal?
Hindi na po, ma'am.
Hindi na, kasi yun na yun.
Kasi po, nakagawa po ako ng isang crime na naman po yung bawal.
Ito, outside travel. Diba? Sinabi natin, bawal talaga sila. So, ano ba, paano sila nagkakaroon ng outside travel? So, kawawa naman kung kunwari Pampanga lang sila forever. So, the probation officer authorized the probationer to travel outside, okay, the area of the operation for a period of 10 days, but not exceeding 30 days. Pwede naman payagan yan. If 30 days, kunwari, what if mag-exceed naman siya ng 30 days? If 30 days, probation must file 5 days before the travel, a request to travel outside for the approval of probation authorities. Kapag ang travel mo, okay, it will just last for only, kunwari, bakasyon lang, 1 week, period of 7 days. Pwede kang magpaalam kay probation officer mo, kay Ashley, ganyan. Pero kapag yung bakasyon mo is masyadong matagal, sabihin mo ng 30 days, yan, 30 days, kailangan mag-apply ka na doon sa mismong probation administration. Yung sa tinatawag nating PPA. Okay? If more than 30 days naman, okay, probation authorities shall recommend for court approval. So, for example, yung ina-apply mo naman outside travel is, for example, magto 2 months siya. 2 months kang wala sa Pampanga. Ang probation authorities noon, hindi lang magre-rely sa kanila ang desisyon. Kailangan mag-apply muna sila ulit kay Christian Kate Pagarigan or yung sa judge natin. Naintindihan? Nalilito ba? Again, if period of 10 days but not exceeding 30 period of 10 days, kanino siya pwedeng mag-apply kay probation
Officer, ma'am?
officer? Okay. If 30 days naman, kanino siya pwedeng mag-apply? Dun sa mismong probation administration or authorities. Kapag more than 30 days naman, kanino siya pwedeng mag-apply?
Court.
Kay
Judge.
court and judge. Okay, next. Change of residence. Okay. The probationer must file a request for change of residence at the city or provincial parole and probation officer to the court approval. Kung maglilipat ka naman ng permanente na tahirahan, kailangan mag-apply ka muna or mag-request ka muna sa probation officer, tapos with court approval pa. If approved na yan, okay, the RTC which has the restriction over the place shall have full control of the probationer. Ito, who is the volunteer probation aide? Sino to? Volunteer. Kayo pwedeng maging ganito. Siguro kung face-to-face lang to, pina-apply ko kayo dito. Itong volunteer probation aide. So, what is a volunteer probation aide? So, he or she is a civilian of a good repute and integrity, at least 18 years of age, diba? Pwede kayo mag-apply. Appointed by the probation administration to assist the POS or the probation officers in investigation and supervision. A VPA is not entitled to salary but is given reasonable travel allowance. So, yung mga volunteer probation aide, sila yung mga kumakatulong dun sa mga probation officers natin. Though wala silang salary, pero meron silang travel allowance. So, pwede kayo mag-apply dyan. Habang, kung nagpapalakas kayo dun sa mismong probation officer, na one day gusto mong maging probation officer, maging part ng administration nila, pwede kayong mag-apply as VPA, di ba? Volunteer Probation Aide. So, termination of probation. Kailan naman matatapos yung pagiging probationer mo? Jackie, ito siya. After the probationer has satisfactorily completed the probation period, the probation officer shall submit termination report to the court containing the following. Ano yan? Condition of probation. Ayan. Program of supervision and response to treatment, and recommendation. Sinong magpapasa nito? Sinong gagawa nito? Hello? Sinong gagawa niyan? Yung condition of probation? Sino?
Probation officer, ma'am.
Probation officer. So, 2 ways of terminating probation. We have 2 ways. Number 1, after period of probation with satisfactory compliance with conditions of probation. And other ways of terminating probation, ito naman, termination before the expiration of the period, serve at least 1/3 of the imposed period but not less than 6 months, or termination by the pardon of probationer, either absolute or conditional. So, meron din tayong deportation of the probationer. When an alien or probation is deported probation will be necessary to be terminated. And then, lastly, syempre, kung namatay ka na, tapos na ang probation mo. So, what are the rights restored ko? What if tapos na? Ano yung babalik sa'yo? Ano yung mga rights na babalik sa'yo as a normal citizen, di ba? All civil rights suspended when the offended was convicted and sentenced are restored after the termination of probation. So, lahat babalik na yan sa'yo. Pwede ka nang uminom or so what. Pwede ka nang gawin nito sa lahat. Pwede ka nang lumipat ng bahay. Lahat yan. So, the liability to pay a fine is also discharged in case of subsidiary imprisonment. For example naman is, yung mga merong liabilities. For example, nagkaroon ka ng yung mga fine, yung kaso may fine. Therefore, pwede ka na rin mag-pay ng fine mo sa subsidiary imprisonment. Okay. So, the next following topic, itong mga yan, i-discuss ko na lang siya, itong how can community help in the success of probation. I will just discuss it in the course unit 8 since it's already 55 minutes ng ating discussion. So, do you have any questions po? Do you have any questions? If you don't have any questions, then I will just click this recording to be done.